Hello, everybody. Terrence Lakeview here with another episode of the Intellectual Agrarian podcast, where we talk philosophy from the farm. Once a farm is started, there's an inevitable point where sales need to start. Our guest today is Tim Young, a marketing and branding expert who decided one day to start a farm with his family. After selling their farm in 2015, Tim's focus became mentoring and teaching farmers how to learn how to market their products effectively. Our conversation today will revolve around on why Tim started farming, how to stop random acts of marketing, and what self-reliance on the farm can mean. You don't want to miss this episode with Tim Young. Tim Young, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Terrence. My pleasure. Happy to be here.
Now, when you started farming, how many different variations of your farm name did you think of before setting on Nature's Harmony Farm?
I think I wanted to call it Freebird Farm because I'm such a Leonard Skinner fan. But my wife actually came up with the name Nature's Harmony Farm when we started. It's funny you asked that because there's a lesson I have in my online academy about how to choose a farm name. And one of the things I talk about is you can choose a mission name, or you can choose a geographic name, for example, or you can choose a product name, based on what you're going to do. Our name was completely about our mission, what we were trying to do, which was farm in harmony with nature. So it was a pretty easy name to come up with.
Mm-hmm. I've met a couple of early beginning farmers over the years, and it's always interesting to see how they come across that process, because there are some people that they just know this is my farm name because this is what I'm doing. It's very mission-based. And then you have people that are a little bit more, they're very good farmers, but not great creatives. So They sit there and go, well, I don't know, we have cows, so there should probably be a cow on the logo.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I talked about in that lesson also in the academy, is that can be limiting. You may have cows, you may start off with cows, but later you may be known for pork or for honey or for cheese or whatever. And so it's best if you don't limit yourself. I mean, for example, there's White Oak Pastures, a good friend of mine, Will Harris down in Georgia runs a really nice, big, successful farm. And that name, White Oak Pastures, it doesn't limit them to one particular type of product. And yet it's pretty intuitive that it's a farm because it's got the name pastures in there. So that's an example of a farm name that gives you, a lot of flexibility in terms of how you grow.
Mm-hmm. And then it also tells the customer that everything's pasture-based that they're consuming.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and implicit in that farm name and is, kind of what their value system is.
And that's really what you're going for in a farm name, is communicating at least a bite-sized part of the farm value, correct?
Well, I think so. I think there are some differences today. If all things being equal, if you could choose a name that was a little bit more search engine optimized, that would be nice. But I don't think you should go out of your way to do that. I mean, you don't want to name your farm, Georgia local pork or something like that. but if you can get something in your name that lends itself to being found on the search engine, I think that's helpful. But the other thing is you want your name to be easy to pronounce and easy to remember. And a lot of times we'll choose these names that are a little bit longer, or I've got some members of the academy that have names that they're good farmers and they're good people, but they've chosen names based on local landmarks or things that people in their area may know and understand, but they're hard to pronounce for other people. And that can become a problem.
I'm from Wisconsin, so we have like Indian this, Indian that are named after these Indian settlements. And unless you're from the area, you have no idea how to pronounce it.
I think you want to choose a name if you can, all things being equal, choose a name that's easy to remember and easy to pronounce.
Now, since we've gone a little bit into the marketing hole, we're going to keep going down that pathway here soon. But first, I want to ask, can you share a brief biographical sketch with the audience? How did you get here?
Well, I grew up in North Georgia. I didn't grow up on a farm at all. None of us had ever done any kind of commercial farming. None of us kept cows or livestock or anything. But, my family, my grandparents, my uncles, my relatives were reasonably self-sufficient, the kind of people that, built their own house by, milling their own lumber. And, we kept a pig. We had a huge garden. Our garden would be measured in acres. So I grew up in that environment and couldn't wait to get away from it. So by I turned 1920, moved away from there, went to Atlanta, then went up to Boston for half my life in Massachusetts, and all that time working in corporate media companies, if you will, television stations, newspapers, direct marketing companies. So my background was in one way, shape, or form has been in marketing, since I was 20 years old, either on the operations side of doing outsourced marketing for large financial services and technology companies, or in starting and running direct marketing agencies. And I guess it was about 2005 or so that a lot of people had this kind of a reawakening then, because of Michael Pollan starting to come out with a lot of his books, and Joel Salatin and a lot of his books. A lot of us started, asking these questions like, where does our food come from? And I think it kind of went full circle for me, kind of reconnected with the way I had grown up, in North Georgia, and in high school, I was writing for a publication called Foxfire Magazine because that was in my school. And so all this kind of came back like, yeah, I don't know where my food comes from. I don't grow any of my own food. I don't change my own oil. I don't mow my own grass. I don't do any of these things to, really take care of myself. And, for some reason, I had just forgotten about that for 20 years when I was in the rat race, just keeping busy, flying from point A to point B. And then once that awakening happened, I think it kind of alarmed me. So my wife had the same awakening. We both decided to just leave the rat race, leave the corporate jobs, and go live in the country. It wasn't really our idea to go farm. It was more our idea to get away from all of that world and become a little bit more self-sufficient, self-reliant. When we did that, we bought 100 acres out in rural Georgia, about 2.5 hours from Atlanta. And, we really got immersed in wanting to bring back the soil health. That meant, putting a lot of animals on the farm. So we put a lot of cows out there, a lot of chickens out there, a lot of pigs in the woods, those kind of things. Well, if you're going to do that, you're going to be farming. So that put us into the farming game. And that brings up the question, what are you going to do with all these animals? And the answer is, you better cultivate a market of customers for that. Fortunately for me, I had a background in marketing, and we were able to successfully connect with a caring community of people who wanted local food. But yeah, that's how we got there. We just basically became alarmed that we didn't know where our food was coming from, and we wanted to go do something about it.
Now, when you started farming, you got into the cheese making business. And since I'm from Wisconsin, and I think that there's a cheese DNA somewhere in my blood,
Right.
I have to ask, so what brought your interest in cheese? Because you won several awards for your cheese.
Yeah, we have, and it was a very backwards approach actually to cheese making. It's a ludicrous story, but basically the farm that we bought was an old dairy farm. There was an old, torn down, basically milking parlor where he used to milk like 100 Holsteins, and he hadn't milked there in 15, 20 years or whatever. So, he had gutted the whole place, cut out all the pipes and everything. So there was nothing there but the physical structure of the barn. So we didn't even think about that when we bought the property. But we had pigs in the woods, and I was raising about 125 or so, 150 Ossabaw Island pigs in the woods. And our whole farming model was we were trying our best to come up with a way to have zero inputs into the farm. In other words, not buying any feed and things like that and bringing it to the farm. Well, that was easy with cows because the cows were just grazing the grass, and we weren't buying any feed for them. But with pigs and with chickens, we were having to buy feed. So my idea, naive and also very mission-based, was why don't we get some Jersey cows, let them eat the grass, start milking the Jersey cows. And if I make cheese, as you know, 90% of the milk is going to be whey, basically, I can take the whey and feed it back to the pigs. And we actually did that. That was, a big part of our process. So cheese was like the afterthought. What I didn't realize is that, cheese is such an inspiring intellectual pursuit, that when you start that process of making cheese, particularly aged cheeses, I mean, it's the kind of thing you can do for, your whole life and never really master. So, I just really fell in love with making cheese. And to this day, I still make cheese a few times a week, big wheels of cheese. And my focus was on, Swiss-style cheeses like Gruyere. I made a lot of that, and we did win awards at the American Cheese Society for that. It's a cheese very similar to a great one you have up there in Wisconsin called Pleasant Ridge Reserve. same form and similar type of cheese. We made cloth-bound cheddar cheeses. We made a blue cheese that won an award at the United States Cheese Championship. So yeah, that was the whole thing. Once I got into cheese, I realized that was the thing that I loved the most about our agrarian pursuit. And over time, our farm really centered on that as a direction.
Well, it's a great product to center around. I mean, again, I'm from Wisconsin. Cheese, it's right. You're right. It's an intellectual pursuit almost because, I mean, some people, that really enjoy wine, they taste out the different flavors. You get just as much complexity in a good cheese as you can in a fine wine.
Absolutely, and I got to experience it from both sides, both the connoisseur who wants to enjoy the cheese, and I get those complexities, but also since I'm crafting the cheese, it's kind of like playing chess. I mean, you learn so much about the things you can do in the make procedure, in the aging process to help create that. And another thing too, in the springtime, for example, in Georgia, since we were managing diverse pastures, we didn't plant, like one grass seed, like, Bermuda or something. We just let the pastures do what the pastures do. So we got all kinds of grasses and we got all kinds of weeds. Well, in the springtime, we get a lot of wild onions in the pastures. Now, a lot of dairy farmers, of course, hate this because you get that onion tint in your milk. Well, guess what? In the spring, I made lots of blue cheese because our cheese, Elberton Blue, blue cheese goes great with garlic and onions. So that would be the time that I would really concentrate on that type of cheese to be able to get those kind of flavors into the cheese. And, it's harder for me to do that when we were raising a lot of chickens. We produced high quality chicken. It was very nutritious, but I couldn't say as a craftsperson that I really had anything too much to do with that. It's just the chickens were out there eating bugs and eating grass. But with cheese, I felt like I had a lot more control over being artistic about what kind of product we were producing.
Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of curious here. At what point did you shift from I'm farming to I want to help other farmers learn how to market their products? Because I used to do farmers markets, and so I have seen the full gamut of farmers that are really good at and some farmers that really need help at it.
We kind of started doing that, maybe 3 years into our farming business, or to our farming enterprise. Back in 2010, 2011, I started hosting these things called farm schools where, people would fly in all over the country. We limited it to 24 people. They would come in and we would hold a farm business school. And one of the things I was clear about in the curriculum when we announced it and when we sold this as a product is that we're not going to teach you how to raise cows or how to, move pigs or things like that, because you're going to know that stuff and you're going to learn that stuff. And there's a lot of resources for that. But it was my belief, and back then, and it still is today, that 80% of successful small scale farming is on the marketing and the business side. People learn how to grow their carrots. They learn how to do raised beds. They learn how to make cheese. But that doesn't mean that you're going to be effective at differentiating your products, choosing the right go-to-market strategy, and getting customers. So we started right away doing the live classes, and always had a lot of success with those and helped a lot of farmers to get started. But that's limited to the people who come there. Today, what I do, of course, is I try to teach all these same lessons and help people in an online type of setting.
That's the Small Farm Nation Academy. Can you go into a little detail what that entails and what people can expect from the program?
Yeah, and it's not really a program. It's a membership site. Just like you think about it this way. We all subscribe to Netflix or Amazon Prime or whatever. These are subscription services that you pay a modest amount for monthly or quarterly or something, and you get ongoing benefits. I decided early on not to create a farm marketing course because for two reasons. The truth is that farm marketing doesn't have a start and a stop. So it isn't like if I teach you these three things, you're going to be an expert farm marketer. It's an ongoing, continual process. But the second reason is that I learned that the people that I want to serve, the farmers that I want to serve, they need help on an ongoing basis. Today, they might need to have some questions about what should I name my farm, to go back to what we started talking about. Next month, it might be, about logo design, or the next month it might be about what's the right go-to-market strategy for me. Should I set up a farm store? Should I do a metropolitan buying club? Should I do a CSA? Should I sell at farmers markets or retail, wholesale, restaurants, or whatever? 2 months later, they might have questions about how do I get PR? What's my media strategy? A few months later, it might be copywriting. How do I write the copy for my about page? Or how do I do email marketing? Or how do I do list building? There's a ton of things that come together in marketing. It isn't one thing. And one of the things that I wanted to do was to be there for them, to help them understand that there's a lot of disciplines in marketing, but you can learn these things. And when you have questions, I'm going to be there in the academy for you. So in the academy, there's a bunch of courses and video lessons. I mean, right now, well over 120, 130 video lessons that will go into every topic that you want. If you come in and you're struggling with your website design, there's 23 lessons on WordPress, about how to, customize a site for you. Or if you're struggling with copywriting, there are 11 lessons there on copywriting. There's also community forums for conversations and questions that you may have for anything specific to you. And there's one-to-one coaching with me. So if you go into the forum and you want to have a private conversation with me, I just did one yesterday with a farmer, that was in the cheese business, and they're struggling with how do they get exposure, and how do they get people out to their farm to buy their cheese subscription. So I did an hour-long call with them to help them do that. Those are things that wouldn't be available if I offered a course, but they are available for ongoing members of the academy.
And that's a great way of doing it too, because you can have the best cheese in the world. Just use this example. You can have the best cheese in the world, but unless someone hears about it, what does it matter? As a farm, you need to have some way of getting your product in front of people.
You need to get in front of people, and you also need to make some intelligent choices about how do you go to market. Because the go-to-market strategy, for example, should you sell to restaurants or should you sell directly to individuals? That choice, there's no right answer to these questions. So you have to bridge the gap between what is your objective with your lifestyle and your farming business, and what market are you serving? And most of the farms that I deal with, I mean, just like in the case of our farm, they're not. It'd be great if we're all located in downtown Chicago or downtown Dallas, but we're not. We're 2.5 hours away. So most of them have to figure out, how do I capitalize on distant marketing opportunities? And sometimes there's an agritourism component that comes in. That was the case of the person I was consulting with yesterday, that they have a great opportunity to blend agritourism, farm dinners, cheese appreciation events, those kind of things, and use that as a vehicle, not just to monetize a profit center, which is agritourism, but also to feed people into their cheese subscription programs. So there's so many, farming really lends itself to so many ways that you can go to market, and so many product choices, right? I mean, compared to any other business, you give someone a piece of land, sure, you can grow vegetables, you can grow protein, but you can also do events, in agritourism. There's so many ways that you can monetize a farming operation.
Now, talking about branding, I think that's something a lot of people ask these days. Is there a difference between, say, a farm brand or a farmer brand? So the farm itself versus the farmer himself.
Well, if you think about a farm, every farm has a farmer, and people are going to want to know who that farmer is. So the farmer is a key part and inherent in that brand. But there are many farmers out there that have done a great job of branding the farmer, of that person being the spokesperson. There are times when you want to do that because it's the personalities, the people that are inspiring, and they're the ones that people want to hear about. But there's other times that you don't want to do that. You might be trying to create an asset that you want to hand off to your children. You might want to create a farm business that you want to sell at some point, whether it's handing it off to your children or selling it. Each case, you've got an exit strategy. And it's easier if the farm isn't centered around one person, but rather it's centered around, a community or a methodology or a value system.
Now, on your podcast, this was one of the things that I found really interesting, because I see this happen far too often. We talk about random acts of marketing. Could you go into details on what a random act of marketing is and how a farmer can avoid falling into this pit hole?
Everybody, whether it's a farmer or small business owner, any small business owner, is committing this sin. They wake up in the morning, they get really busy on doing what they have to do, feeding the chickens, weeding the beds or whatever, and they go, I really need to post something on Facebook. Let me take a picture of this. Or, gosh, I really need to knock out a blog post. Let me just go do that. And they don't understand why. So stop for a second, feed your chickens, then have a cup of coffee or something, and ask yourself, why do I need to post something on Facebook? Now, I'm not saying you don't need to post something on Facebook. What I'm saying is that all of your marketing activities need to be driven by a strategy. What is your strategy? So maybe your strategy is, I need to grow my email list. Okay, well, then you've got to post something on Facebook that is specifically engineered to get people to your website to sign up for your email list, because then you have a strategy. Once they're on your email list, you've got a email sequence that's going to get them to, use a coupon to try your first product. And that's designed to get them into a subscription program or something like that. So your marketing tactics have to be driven by an overall strategy. And very few people in any business approach marketing that way.
I mean, I can sympathize with it even just on a podcast, because you can get busy doing something else and then completely forget, I need to post the clip from the other day's episode.
Right.
It's doing the work and actually having a reason for the work. That's why on our program, we like to start with why, because why motivates how.
Right. Well, and that's a great example. I mean, because being completely honest with you, on my podcast, I don't often talk about the things that I really want to talk about. The things I like talking about most of my life are self-reliance, trying to inspire people to be aware of opportunities to be more self-reliant, because I believe self-reliance gives you freedom to enjoy life. But if I start talking about that, then I'm going to get people on my site looking for that kind of information. And really what I'm trying to do with my podcast is to be of service to people that are either farming or that want to farm. It has to be a farm, food related or small business, because these marketing issues are the same for all of them. So when I create podcast episodes, I think about what are the marketing challenges that I can talk about that they will identify with and that I can be helpful for them on this episode. And then I just create that episode, drive them back to my website. When they come, all I want them to do is listen to the podcast, come back to the website. When you come to the website, I've got a free 3-course video training. I want you to sign up for that free video training. When you do, you're going to get automated email sequences that I've created for you. And at the end of that, I'm going to ask you if you would like to join the academy. And most people won't join the academy because they want the free training, and that's totally cool. I'm glad I could help them with that. But if they do want to join the academy, I'll get them an invitation there. And if they don't want to join the academy, then all they'll ever hear from me is when I have email updates from, about the podcast. But an example of a marketing sequence. I do the podcast for content marketing, but the goal of the podcast is to draw people back to the website so that they sign up for the free training.
So since you are on someone else's podcast, I can ask you about self-reliance.
Sure.
So when a farm obviously should be as much as possible self-reliant. What are some ways that farmers, these are things that I can do to change to be more self-reliant?
Well, I think that we all have grown up, unless we're 80 or if somebody's 80 years old or older listening to this, I think that all of the rest of us have grown up in a society of convenience. So we basically, without making a conscious choice, have abdicated all responsibility for the things that we need to live. Do we know how to source and purify water? Do we know how to produce all of our own food? I'm not just talking about growing vegetables and stuff. I am talking about making cheese too, because making cheese is to milk what cutting hay is to the pastures. You're just preserving the milk for a long period of time. So do we know how to do things like that? Do we know how to start a fire without, a fire starter and, a whole bunch of matches, these kind of things? Do we know how to keep ourselves warm? Do we know how to build shelters? This goes way beyond farming, but farming, this passion that so many people have about starting small scale farms is a gateway to a deeper understanding of self-reliance. We're the kind of people, my wife and I, my family are the kind of people that we still enjoy all the conveniences. I mean, I'll be glad to go to Chick-fil-A because it's a great place for a play group for my daughter. So we'll enjoy modern conveniences like that. But we spend a lot of time focused on, do we have enough food stored? Do we have access to water? Do we have backup, emergency generators in case there's power outages? Can we produce electricity on our own for periods of time? So that when the hurricanes come, like they came last month, it's sad and devastating to so many, but it really has no impact on us other than the internet might go down, and I have no control over that. So I think if you're farming, you start asking yourself the questions, can I take care of myself and my family's needs completely first before I start sharing all of this, what I'm producing, with customers?
And that's the original farm model. I mean,
Yeah.
Going back to my great-grandmother grew up on a farm, and we've often talked, I'm an organic inspector, so she tells me we had it organic then. It's just there was no marketing label for it. It's just the way it was. And
Exactly.
they knew how to be self-reliant. They survived the Depression. When the Depression hit, everyone else kind of sank, but they were still at the same spot because they fed themselves, they raised their own food. They were doing well.
I interviewed someone for a podcast, a few years ago who wrote a book about that. She lived through the Depression, and she said, basically, and she was a child of the Depression, but she said they didn't know there was a Depression. For them, life was basically the same.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much, Tim, for being on the podcast. You've shared some great practicals. People, I will link to all of your content down in the show notes, but where can people go to learn more about you and your work?
Well, the best place is just go to smallfarmnation.com. And like I said, there's free training there. If anybody's interested in farm marketing or business planning, the 3-video course gives them a 1-page business plan, and it gives them some other training on farm marketing, and it's free.
Well, thank you again so much for being on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks, and keep up the great work.
A lot of great practicals if you're a small farm or small business in this episode. Be sure to check out Tim's resources at smallfarmnation.com. Links to all of that will be in the show notes. Thanks again to Tim for being on the show. Thanks again for listening. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast in your podcast player of choice. While you're there, please be kind enough to leave us a rating and review. It really helps out the show and allows us to reach others with the program. This has been Terrence Lehue and the Intellectual Agrarian Podcast, reminding you to keep farming the dream.